The market smelled of dust, metal, and desperation. Nalara walked through the crowded lanes, her eyes searching for the sign that marked the exchange hall. She kept her thin shawl wrapped tight around her body, hiding her hollow cheeks and trembling hands. The famine had taken almost everything from her, her husband, her work, her dignity. The only thing left was her son, Terrell. Terrell was only 7 years old, but already his bones showed through his skin. The sickness of hunger had made him weak, and every day he coughed more than the last. Nalara had tried everything, cleaning homes, carrying water, even scavenging from the waste pits, but food was almost gone in every corner of the city. She knew today was the day she would make her last choice. A choice she hated. A choice she had thought she would never make. The exchange market stood at the center of the ruined city. Once, it had been a place where traders from 100 worlds came to barter goods. Now, it was where the desperate came to sell themselves. A wide metal, board-listed offers, laborers for the mines, fighters for the arenas, companions for the wealthy. The buyers were not always kind. Most saw sellers as property, nothing more. Nalara's hands shook as she walked through the gate. A guard scanned her with a dull silver device, recording her name and species. "Purpose of sale?" he asked, without looking at her. "For food," Nalara whispered. The guard only nodded. "Room 17. Wait for bidding." The waiting room was cold and bare. A few others sat there. Thin, silent figures, some staring at the floor, some staring at the wall as if they had already left this world in their minds. Nalara sat down in the corner and thought of Terrell's face. She told herself she was not giving up. She was fighting for him, even if it meant giving herself away. An hour passed before her number was called. She stepped onto the raised platform, bright lights shining down, making her squint. The auctioneer, a tall alien with gold skin, began to speak. "Lot number 12, female, skilled in cleaning, cooking, basic repairs. Good physical condition for labor." Nalara kept her head down as voices called out prices. The numbers rose slowly. Most buyers looked bored. She wondered if the price would even be enough to feed Terrell for more than a few weeks. Then a new voice spoke, deep, clear, and human. 500 credits. The room went quiet for a moment. Humans rarely came to the exchange market, and when they did, they didn't usually pay that much. Nalara looked up. The man was tall, with short, dark hair and sharp eyes. His clothes were simple but clean, and he stood with a confidence that made others step back without realizing it. "Sold," the auctioneer said quickly, sealing the deal before anyone else could bid. Nalara felt her knees weaken. 500 credits was enough to buy food for Terrell for months. Relief and fear mixed inside her. She did not know this human. She did not know what he wanted, but the food tokens would be sent to her son immediately. That was the only thing that mattered now. The man approached her as the guards unlocked her cuffs. "Name's Elias Ward," he said, his voice calm. "You're with me now." Nalara nodded, unsure what to say. She expected orders, maybe a warning about the rules she must follow. Instead, Elias simply gestured toward the door. "Let's go. My ship's waiting." The streets outside the exchange hall were loud and busy, but people made space for the human as he walked. Nalara followed, clutching her shawl. At the landing pads, a sleek silver ship waited. Its surface reflected the red light of the dying sun. Elias led her inside. The air was warm and smelled faintly of spice. She braced herself for a small, dark storage room where she would be kept. Instead, Elias opened the door to a cabin. "This will be your room," he said. "There's a bed, a bathroom, and a locker for your things. You'll have meals with the crew." If you need anything, tell me or Kessa, our medic. Nalara stared at him, confused. I thought I was a servant? Elias finished for her. He gave a short laugh. You're part of the crew now. You'll have duties, sure, but nothing worse than what we all do. First, you rest. You look like you haven't had a full meal in months. She wanted to ask why. Why had he paid so much? Why was he giving her a room, food, and freedom to move? But she stayed silent. She didn't trust this kindness yet. That night, she lay on the soft bed, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, almost comforting. She thought of Terrell and the food he would have by now. She thought of Elias and the strange look in his eyes, not the cold greed of most buyers, but something warmer, though she did not yet believe it could last. For the first time in many weeks, Nalara slept without the gnawing pain of hunger in her belly, but in her heart there was still a tight knot of fear. She had sold herself to survive. Now she had to see what the cost truly was. When Nalara woke the next morning, she almost forgot where she was. For a moment, she thought she was back in her old room on her home world, listening to the wind rattling the broken shutters. But there was no wind here. Only the low hum of the ship's engines. The bed was soft, the blanket warm. Her body ached less than it had in weeks. She sat up slowly, wondering if all of this had been some kind of dream. A gentle chime sounded near the door. "Come in," she said quietly. The door slid open, and a woman with greenish skin and short silver hair stepped inside. She wore a light medical coat and carried a small scanner. "You must be Nalara. I'm Kessa, the ship's medic. Captain told me to give you a checkup." Nalara nodded, still unsure how to act. She had expected to be treated like property, not greeted politely. Kessa worked quickly, scanning her and making notes on a small device. "You're underweight," Kessa said. "Your muscles are weak, and you've been short on clean water. But nothing permanent. You'll recover fast with good food and rest." "Good food?" Nalara asked carefully, as if it were an impossible thing. Kessa smiled. "Yes. Speaking of which, come to the galley when you're ready. Breakfast is waiting." Nalara followed the directions and soon found herself in the ship's galley, a wide room with tables bolted to the floor and large viewing windows showing the black of space. Elias was there, drinking from a steaming cup. He looked up as she entered. "Morning," he said simply. "Sit." She hesitated, then sat across from him. A moment later, Kessa brought a plate of warm bread, fruit, and a small bowl of something that smelled rich and savory. Nalara's stomach tightened painfully at the scent. She picked up the spoon and ate slowly, savoring every bite. "You can eat more if you want," Elias said. "There's no rationing here." She looked at him in surprise. "No rationing? Not even for someone like me?" Elias frowned slightly. "Someone like you? You mean crew?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I sold myself. I thought that meant I'm yours." Elias leaned back in his chair. "You signed a contract, yes. But on my ship, that means you work and get paid. It doesn't mean I own you." She stared at him, unsure if she believed him. "Then why did you pay so much?" He shrugged. "Because you looked like you needed help. And because I needed someone who wouldn't give up when things got hard." Nalara lowered her eyes to her food, confused. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not since before the famine. After breakfast, Elias gave her a tour of the ship. The vessel was small, but well kept, with narrow corridors, a cargo bay, engineering room, and a bridge filled with blinking lights and screens. The crew was made up of 3 others besides Elias and Kessa, a young human pilot named Joran, a quiet engineer called Thavik, and a tall insectoid alien named Rill, who worked as cargo master. They all greeted Nalara politely, as though she were no different from them. It made her feel both welcome and uneasy. She wasn't used to this kind of respect. Her duties were simple at first: cleaning the common areas, helping Kessa with basic supply checks, and learning how to operate some of the ship's simple systems. Elias told her she would learn more over time. Days passed, and Nalara began to see how Elias treated his crew. He listened to their ideas, never shouted, and always made sure everyone was safe before taking risks. He gave the same respect to aliens and humans alike. One evening, as they sat in the galley after a long day, Kessa brought up news from the outer colonies. "Another famine report," she said, showing a small news screen. "A cargo freighter was attacked. Food shipments lost." Nalara felt her chest tighten. "That's how it starts," she murmured. "First the shortages, then the fighting, then the exchange market grows." Elias looked at her for a long moment. "You've seen it before?" She nodded. "It happened on my world. The leaders kept the food for themselves. Everyone else had to choose between starving or selling something they could never get back." Silence hung in the room for a moment. Then Elias said, "That's why we run these trade routes. We take supplies where others won't go. We don't work for the big trade houses. They charge too much and care too little." Nalara studied him. "You do this for profit?" "Some," Elias admitted. "But not all profit is about money." She didn't understand everything he meant, but his tone was different from the greedy merchants she had known. Later that night, in her cabin, Nalara lay awake thinking about Elias's words. She thought about the food tokens Terrell now had, about the strange freedom she felt aboard this ship. It was a fragile thing, like glass in her hands. She was afraid it could shatter any moment. The next day, they landed on a busy trading station to resupply. Nalara walked with Kessa through the market to buy medical goods. The stalls were loud and crowded, filled with voices speaking dozens of languages. That was when she saw him, Varric. He was taller than most, with dark scaled skin and a cruel twist to his mouth. He had once been a debt collector for the corrupt, rulers on her homeworld. She remembered the way he used to walk into starving homes and take whatever was left, food, blankets, even children, claiming it was all payment. "Well, well," Varric said, his yellow eyes narrowing. "I thought you were dead, Nalara." Her throat went dry. "Leave me alone." He stepped closer. "You belong to someone now, don't you? Doesn't matter who. I can take you back. There are still debts to pay." Before Nalara could answer, a shadow fell over them. Elias stood beside her, his voice calm but sharp as steel. "She's under my contract. Touch her, and you'll regret it." Varric laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his eyes. Humans, always thinking they're dangerous. Elias didn't smile. "We don't think it. We know it." Varric stepped back, his grin fading. "This isn't over." He melted into the crowd. Nalara's hands trembled, but Elias only nodded toward the ship. "Let's go." As they walked back, Nalara felt the fragile safety she'd begun to trust crack, just a little. Her past was not gone. It was still chasing her across the stars. The trading station's bright corridors faded behind them as Elias and Nalara stepped back into the warm air of the ship. The metal doors slid shut, sealing away the noise of the market. Nalara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands were still shaking from the encounter with Varric. She hadn't seen him in years, but his presence was like a shadow stretching across her mind. Elias walked ahead, calm and silent, but she could feel his attention on her. Finally, in the galley, he stopped and turned. "Who was that?" She hesitated. "Varric. He was a debt collector on my world, worked for the leaders who caused the famine. He took food from starving families and called it repayment. I thought I had escaped him." Elias's jaw tightened. "And now he's here." Nalara nodded. "He's dangerous. He has contacts, people who can make someone disappear. If he says there are debts, he'll chase me no matter where I go." Elias leaned on the table. Let him try. She stared at him. You don't understand. On my world, people who challenged him vanished, even the brave ones. Elias's eyes were steady. I'm not from your world, and I don't vanish easily. She wanted to believe him, but fear was hard to shake. That night, Nalara tried to rest, but sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the ship sounded like footsteps. Every hum of the engine felt like a warning. In the morning, the crew prepared for departure. Joran, the young pilot, called from the bridge. Captain, we've got a message coming through, encrypted. Elias frowned and walked to the control panel. The screen flickered, showing a short, jagged line of text. She is ours. Return her or pay the price. Kessa glanced at Nalara. Guess we know who sent that. Elias shut off the message and turned to the crew. We're not changing our course, but we'll be ready. 3 days into their journey, trouble came. It started with a sudden alarm. Rill, the insectoid cargo master, clattered into the galley. Ship approaching fast. No ID signal. Elias was already moving toward the bridge. Nalara followed, her chest tight. Through the wide viewing window, a dark, spiked ship appeared against the stars, gliding closer like a predator. They're hailing us, Joran said. Elias crossed his arms. Let's hear it. The screen came alive with Varric's face. His grin was wider now. I warned you, human. Hand over the girl, or we take her and your ship with us. Elias's voice was calm. You'll get nothing from me. Now turn. That rust bucket around before I make you regret following us. Varric chuckled. Brave words. Let's see if your guns are as big as your mouth. The screen went dark. Moments later, the enemy ship fired. The crew moved in controlled chaos. Joran threw the ship into evasive maneuvers, engines roaring. Kessa secured the medbay for incoming injuries. Rill sealed the cargo hold. Nalara gripped the side of the control chair. I can help, she said, though fear knotted her stomach. Elias glanced at her. You know nav systems? Yes, basic ones. I used to guide cargo skiffs before the famine. Good. Sit here. Plot us a course through that asteroid field. He pointed to a cluster of spinning rocks on the navigation screen. Nalara's fingers flew over the controls. The enemy ship fired again, but the asteroids were close now, filling the view with jagged shapes and shadows. She guided the ship between two massive rocks, tilting the course to avoid smaller fragments. Sharp left, now, she called. Joran obeyed, and a burst of debris slammed into the enemy's shields instead of theirs. Nice work, Elias said, his hands moving over the weapon controls. He fired a short burst, hitting one of the enemy's thrusters. Varric's ship spun, clipped an asteroid, and fell back. They're retreating, Joran reported, relief in his voice. The tension eased, but Nalara's heart was still racing. She had expected to freeze, to be useless, but instead she had helped. Later, in the quiet of the observation deck, Nalara stood by the wide glass window, staring at the stars. Elias joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot tea. You did well today, he said, handing her one. She accepted it with both hands. I just followed the screen. You saved us. He shook his head. We saved us. You saw the course before I did. That made the difference. She hesitated before speaking. I didn't think I could do anything anymore. The famine took everything from me. My strength, my hope. Selling myself felt like proof that I had nothing left. Elias leaned on the railing. Listen to me, Nalara. Worth isn't something given to you. It's something you decide you have. You proved today that you're more than someone's property. You're crew, and crew fights back. She looked down at the tea, unsure what to say. But deep inside, something shifted. It was small, fragile, but real, a spark of belief in herself. The next morning, Joran reported that Varric's ship was nowhere on the scanners. But Elias didn't relax. He'll be back, he said quietly to Kessa. Men like him don't let go. We'll have to end this before he tries again. Nalara overheard those words and knew Elias was right. Her past was chasing her, and it would not stop until one of them was gone. As the ship sailed onward toward their next destination, Nalara felt the spark in her chest grow warmer. She wasn't just running anymore. For the first time, she thought about fighting back. The ship glided silently through the dark expanse of space, the stars streaking past in long, pale lines. Nalara sat in the galley, cleaning a small set of plates, but her thoughts were not on chores. They were on Varek. Even after the last skirmish, his shadow haunted her. Every noise aboard the ship made her jump. A clank of metal, the hum of a distant engine, even the soft footsteps of a crew member. She had thought the fight on the asteroid field had been over, but fear lingered in her, chest like a stone. Elias entered the galley quietly, hands tucked behind his back. "You look tense," he said, sitting across from her. Nalara didn't answer at first. She watched him, wondering why a human, an alien to her world, could seem so calm while danger loomed. I keep thinking he'll come back," she admitted. Elias nodded. "He will, but we won't be caught off guard. We'll be ready." She hesitated. "Ready? How?" "He has ships, weapons, men who don't care if they die." Elias's eyes were steady. "We have something better than weapons. Strategy, teamwork, and people who care for each other. That makes all the difference." The warning lights flashed, suddenly breaking the calm. Joran's voice came over the intercom, urgent and sharp. "Captain, sensors show multiple ships approaching from the starboard side. They're fast, armed, and heading straight for us." Elias was immediately on, his feet moving toward the bridge. "Everyone to stations. Nalara, come with me." Fear clenched Nalara's stomach, but she followed. For the first time, she realized she could not hide behind safety or fear. She had a choice, to freeze or to act. On the bridge, alarms blared. The stars outside the windows were no longer calm points of light. They were broken by the jagged forms of 3 dark, spiked ships closing in. Varek's voice came through the communications line, cold and mocking. "I warned you. Hand her over now, or this will end badly for you." Elias's hand moved over the controls. "We don't negotiate with pirates. Fire when ready." The battle began immediately. Energy bolts flashed across space, bouncing off shields, throwing shadows across the ship's interior. Nalara felt the ship shake with each hit. She gripped a rail, knuckles white, heart pounding. Elias barked orders to the crew, his voice calm but commanding. "Joran, evasive maneuvers. Rill, prep the cargo bay defenses. Kessa, ready the med bay." Nalara swallowed hard. I can help with the navigation. I know these asteroid routes." Elias glanced at her. "Good. Take the control panel and guide us through the debris field ahead. I'll follow your path with weapons." She sat at the navigation console, hands shaking as she calculated angles and distances. Outside, the first few asteroids spun slowly through space. Nalara guided the ship between them, weaving in patterns that even she did not know she could handle. "Left drift, now!" she shouted, and Joran followed her instructions. The ship twisted, narrowly avoiding a spinning rock that could have torn it apart. Elias fired a short burst at the closest enemy ship. Sparks erupted as the hull was struck. One of Varek's ships clipped an asteroid, spinning off course. "Keep going," Elias called. "Almost clear." Nalara's fingers flew over the console. She calculated every movement, heart racing. Finally, the ship slipped through the tightest part of the field, the asteroids tearing past like a river of stone. They were safe, for now. When the last of the enemy ships retreated, the bridge was silent except for the soft hum of the engines. Nalara's hands were trembling so badly that she had to sit down. Elias approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said. "Without you, we would have been hit hard. Your quick thinking saved lives." I never thought I could," she stammered. "I thought I was useless." "Not anymore," Elias said. "You proved today that you are valuable, not because of what you can do for others, but because of what you choose to do when it matters." She stared at him, feeling something unfamiliar. Pride? Relief? Perhaps hope? She realized that fear had been her only guide for so long that she didn't recognize courage when it came. But now she had touched it herself. After the battle, the crew worked silently to repair the minor damages. Nalara helped Kessa check the injured crew members, cleaning small cuts and offering water. She realized that she could be useful, not just to survive, but to protect others. Later, in the observation deck, Nalara stood watching the stars. Elias joined her, offering 2 steaming cups of tea. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the ship. "You've changed," Elias said quietly. "The last few days. You've gone from someone who only thought of survival to someone who sees the bigger picture." Nalara looked at the stars. "I had no choice before. I sold myself because I had nothing else. I thought fear was my only strength. But today I realized I can do more than survive." Elias smiled. "Exactly. That's the human way. We fight for more than just survival. We fight for each other, for what is right, for hope." Hope. The word felt heavy and bright in her chest. She had almost forgotten it. Almost. The next day, Nalara began helping with training drills. Elias encouraged her, guiding her hand as she learned to operate more complex systems aboard the ship. For the first time, she felt she had purpose. She was no longer just a mother trying to feed her son. She was part of a team, a part of something bigger than herself. Yet she knew Varric was still out there. He would not give up. His shadow would follow her until he was stopped. But now she had more than fear to rely on. She had allies. She had skill. And, slowly, she was learning to trust herself. That night, she wrote a small note for Tyrell, explaining she was safe, that food was on the way, and that she had found people who cared. She folded it carefully and placed it in her bag. Somewhere, in the stars, she felt a small, fragile smile forming on her lips. The battle had tested her. The fear had been real, but Nalara realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it, and she was ready to act. The journey toward Nalara's homeworld was tense. Every blink of the stars outside the ship reminded her of the danger still lurking. Varric's shadow was never far behind. She could feel it pressing at the edges of her thoughts, whispering that nothing had changed, that her freedom was fragile. Elias paced in the galley while the crew made final preparations for their approach to the planet. "We need a plan," he said, voice calm but firm. "Varric will be expecting a simple delivery, but we're not delivering anything, except the truth." Nalara looked up from the maps she had spread across the table. "The truth?" "Yes," Elias said. "We're going to expose the corruption, the famine, the system that forced people to sell themselves. If we can broadcast it to the world, Varric will have no power left." Her stomach tightened. "And if he attacks us? Then we fight, together." His eyes held hers. "You'll see the strength of humans when we protect others, but you'll also see your own." The ship entered orbit, its engines humming quietly, ready for the operation. Nalara helped Elias study the layout of the exchange market's central control tower. She memorized security checkpoints, communication lines, and emergency exits. Though she had once been powerless, now she had knowledge, skill, and allies. Kessa watched her closely. "You're learning fast," she said. "I've seen people twice your age hesitate, But you act. Nalara lowered her eyes. I don't want to hesitate anymore. I've waited too long to do nothing. The plan was simple in words, difficult in execution. Elias would lead the crew into the tower using stealth, bypassing most guards. Nalara and Kessa would handle the communication systems, broadcasting the evidence of corruption across the planet. Rill would manage cargo and supplies, while Joran kept a lookout from the ship's orbit, ready to call in reinforcements if needed. Night fell on the city below. Its streets were eerily quiet, the once bustling marketplaces now empty, save for the few who feared retribution. Nalara's heart thumped as the ship's small shuttle descended toward the control tower. The moment the shuttle touched down, Elias signaled everyone to move. Nalara followed him silently, careful not to make a sound. Every step brought memories of her old life rushing back, famine, fear, and Varric's cruel grin. But she refused to let fear control her anymore. Inside the control tower, security cameras scanned the halls, but Elias's team moved quickly and quietly. Nalara's hands shook as she approached the main terminal. She felt the weight of her past pressing down, but Elias's calm presence beside her reminded her that she was no longer alone. Ready? Elias whispered. Nalara nodded. Ready. Her fingers moved over the controls, bypassing encrypted codes, opening the system to broadcast the truth. Images of starving families, empty warehouses, and the leaders hoarding supplies appeared on screens across the planet. The citizens could see everything. She felt a surge of power, unlike anything she had known before. She was no longer a victim. She was a messenger, a fighter, a force for change. Suddenly, alarms blared. Varric's men had found them. Soldiers poured into the hallway, weapons raised. Elias didn't hesitate. "Positions!" he shouted. Nalara ducked behind a console, Kessa at her side. Blaster fire lit the room in bursts of red and blue. Nalara's heart raced, but she focused on the terminal, keeping the broadcast alive. Every second counted. Elias and the others fought with skill and precision. He moved like a shadow, striking and dodging, his voice guiding the crew, giving them confidence. Nalara realized that humans fought not only with strength, but with strategy, courage, and unity. A soldier broke through her cover, but Nalara acted instinctively. She kicked a loose panel into his path, buying Elias a moment to disarm him. Her hands were trembling, but she kept working, keeping the broadcast going until it reached every screen on the planet. Outside, the citizens began to react. Doors opened. People came into the streets, shouting, sharing food, and helping each other. For the first time in years, the famine-stricken city below felt alive. Varric saw the chaos and knew he had lost control. His face twisted in rage as Elias and his crew continued to hold their ground. The battle in the tower was fierce but brief. Once the message was sent, morale shifted. Varric's soldiers faltered, realizing the citizens were no longer afraid to rise. Finally, Varric himself appeared at the top of the stairs. His yellow eyes locked on Nalara, but Elias stepped between them. "It ends here," he said calmly. "Leave, or face defeat." Varric growled and turned, retreating down the stairs. The citizens below, emboldened by the broadcast, shouted and began dismantling the corrupt system. The famine's hold weakened, and the exchange market's power began to crumble. After the battle, the crew gathered in the control room. Nalara sank into a chair, exhausted but exhilarated. She looked at Elias, who smiled quietly. "You did amazing," he said. "You faced fear and kept moving forward. That's what makes someone stronger than anyone expects." "I couldn't have done it alone," Nalara admitted. You taught me that people can care, that humans care about others in ways I didn't understand before." Elias shook his head. "I didn't teach you. You remembered it yourself. You chose to act, even when fear wanted you to hide. That's what matters." Nalara looked out the window at the city below. She could see small fires, lights of people reclaiming their lives. She thought of Terrell, safe and fed, and a warmth spread through her chest. "I hope this changes things," she whispered. "It will," Elias said, "because people like you are now part of it. Change comes from courage, and you've shown plenty." That night, as the ship lifted off and soared into the stars, Nalara finally allowed herself to feel relief. The past was still out there, but she was no longer powerless. She had allies, she had skills, and most importantly, she had hope. She wrote a note to Terrell telling him about the city, about the people who had finally begun to stand up for themselves, and about the new life she was building. She folded it carefully, knowing it would reach him safely. As she stared out at the endless stars, she understood something she had never truly believed before. Survival was not enough. Hope, courage, and love made life worth fighting for, and she was ready for whatever came next. The stars stretched endlessly around the ship as it sailed away from Nalara's homeworld. The city below was alive with movement, people sharing food, rebuilding homes, and reclaiming their lives after years of famine. The exchange markets' corruption had collapsed, its leaders fleeing or arrested. For the first time, Nalara felt a deep sense of relief. But relief alone was not enough. She had survived fear, battles, and uncertainty, yet she still carried the weight of her choices. She had sold herself once, believing it was the only way to save her son. She had feared humans, feared Elias, feared that freedom was fragile. Now, the truth was clear. Freedom, hope, and love were stronger than any contract, stronger than any fear. Elias entered the observation deck, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. "You've been quiet," he said, offering one to her. Nalara accepted, staring at the stars. "I've been thinking about everything, about Terrell, the city, Varek, and about you." Elias's eyes met hers. "And?" She took a deep breath. "I don't know how to thank you. Not for saving me or for helping my son, but for showing me that kindness isn't weakness, that humans can care even when it's risky." He smiled softly. "I didn't save you to be thanked. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. That's what humans do. We fight for those we care about." Her chest tightened. For so long, she had equated survival with fear and labor. Now she understood that life was about more than surviving. It was about connection, trust, and courage. The crew gathered in the galley for their evening meal. Kessa handed Nalara a plate of fresh food, and for the first time, she ate without hesitation, savoring every bite. Rill and Joran spoke quietly in the corner, discussing their next trade route. Elias moved among them, checking that everyone had what they needed. After the meal, Nalara lingered on the deck. Elias joined her, looking out at the endless space. "You've come a long way," he said, "from fear to action, from survival to choice." Nalara nodded. "I was afraid I would always be powerless, that selling myself made me nothing more than property. But you've shown me that worth isn't given. It's earned, and it's chosen." Elias glanced at her, a faint warmth in his gaze. "And you've earned it, Nalara. You've chosen it. That's why you're here, free, alive, and part of this crew, not a servant." Her heart lifted. She realized that the contract that had brought her to him no longer defined her. She was no one's property. She was her own person. The days passed with routine and work. Nalara trained with the crew, learning navigation, ship maintenance, and even basic defense tactics. She began to feel her confidence grow. Every task completed, every skill learned, reinforced the belief that she could face any challenge. One evening, while the ship drifted near a nebula, Nalara sat with Elias in the observation deck. Silence stretched comfortably between them. "You never asked why I paid for you at the exchange market," Elias said quietly. Nalara looked at him, curious. "Why?" He shrugged. "Maybe it was instinct. Maybe I saw someone in need and decided to act. But mostly, I saw strength. I didn't know you yet, but I knew you would survive. And when people survive, sometimes they surprise you with what they can do." Nalara felt warmth spread through her chest. No one had ever believed in her like that. Not her family, not her world, not even herself. And yet here was someone who had chosen to see her value, not as property, but as a person. Weeks later, the crew approached a distant colony for supplies. Nalara prepared the shuttle with Kessa, careful and precise. Elias joined her before departure. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, her confidence steady. "Yes, for the first time I feel like I belong somewhere. Not because someone owns me, but because I choose to be here." Elias smiled, and for a moment the stars themselves seemed to shine brighter. "Good. That's exactly how it should be." The shuttle lifted off, and Nalara guided it with skill, navigating asteroid clusters and solar flares with confidence. She felt a thrill of freedom she had never known. It wasn't just movement through space. It was movement through life, unbound by fear or contracts. That night, after returning to the ship, Nalara wrote a letter to Taro. She told him about the city, about the people rising against corruption, and about her life aboard the ship. She reassured him that he was safe, fed and loved. She folded the letter carefully, imagining his small hands holding it. Elias watched her quietly. "Do you ever regret what happened?" he asked. Nalara shook her head. "No. Every step, even the hardest, led me here, and I've learned more about courage, love, and freedom than I ever could have imagined." He nodded. "Good. And just remember, what you choose now defines you, not what others forced you to do." Her smile was small but real. "I understand." Weeks later, as the ship sailed toward distant stars, Nalara looked around at the crew. They were no longer strangers. They were companions, allies, friends. She had fought, survived, and learned. She had helped change her world and discovered the strength within herself. Elias approached, standing beside her. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Nalara nodded. "Yes. Whatever comes, I know I can face it. Not alone and not as property, but as someone who has chosen her path." Elias placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "That's the human way. And now, you're part of it." She felt the warmth of trust, respect, and something deeper, an unspoken bond that did not require ownership, only understanding and care. The stars stretched endlessly before them. Nalara finally felt free. She had survived hunger, fear, and darkness. She had found allies, hope, and courage. And most importantly, she had discovered that love was not possession. It was choice. She turned her gaze to Elias and smiled. Not because he had bought her, not because he had saved her, but because he had shown her a truth that could never be taken away. Freedom, hope, and love were hers to keep, always. And for the first time in her life, she believed it.